Hi, it's Diederik Elderman, speaker, trainer, author of 4 published books and founder of Turbocharger Practice and Veterinary Productivity Academy. Now, this is this extra video that I've tacked on for you. And in the 4 videos or the 4 emails that you've received in this accelerated learning month of June, at the bottom of the email you would have seen a PDF called Accelerated Adult Learning, and they're really my notes to myself and my notes to my one-on-one students and my notes to my Accelerated Adult Learning workshop attendees when I do this in a workshop format. And I've shared these with you, and I just want to go through it very briefly and add some extra layers to that. So the first thing is that when you know, in these 4 videos, I've been saying that you'll improve your learning by 30%, decrease the time required by 30%. Well, it's as much as 50%. And I didn't want to say that during the first few videos because it's hard to understand that you can improve your learning by 30% and decrease the time required by 30%. But 50% is actually a little bit, you know, out of left field. And why have I saved that to the 5th video? Because if you've been implementing these strategies over the last 4 weeks, as I know you have been, then you'll actually have seen these outcomes happen. And now is the time for me to tell you that with practice and rehearsal and role play, yeah, there we go again, you got to practice this stuff. It just doesn't fall out of the sky and jump in your head and happen, you know, boom. You've got to practice it. With practice and rehearsal and role play, you can actually improve your learning outcomes by 50%. So there's your carrot, if you like, you know, go for it, go for 50%. So the first thing I want to talk about are the 4 opportunities for learning, or the 4 windows for learning. And the first window is from about birth to 6 years of age, and we're just giant sponges at that stage. And scientists think that about 50% of all brain capacity and brain capability is developed during that stage. And it's really get the point, important that learning appropriate activities be introduced to children at that age to maximize their opportunity for learning in the future. So games and learning opportunities at that age are really critical. The next window is from about 6 to 10 years of age, and this is when the logical thoughts start to happen, and this is when you start to develop a logical thinking child and a responsible caring child. So it's this a really important window, and how you teach them and what they see happen in the family and you as role models, etc., absolutely critical. Third stage is 10 to 15 years, and during that stage each child learns their own unique learning style and their unique learning ability and pattern of learning. And when they're taught or helped to achieve their best learning style, and we've been through a lot of that in the last 4 weeks. And the other thing that I'd suggest you look at, and I haven't got time or the ability to do it here because it involves a live thing. There's a learning. We have a number of learning styles, and we're either visual learners, auditory learners, kinesthetic learners, or auditory digital learners. When they learn which of the learning styles that most suit them, then and apply that at this 10 to 15 years of age, again their abilities to learn just go exponentially, you know, crazy. And then the 4th window is from 16 years of age, you know, through to college or university, and that's when they need to learn examination techniques and how to pass exams, because that's a totally separate, different ability. And that's also when they can be introduced to some advanced learning techniques as well. And that's also when they learn to solve problems more effectively and more creatively. So they're the 4 stages of learning. Now, also in these notes, I'll just go through a couple of points here to explain what they mean. So the first thing is all learning is state dependent, and state is your physiological state. If you're glum and down and not feel like learning and not feel like doing anything, don't study, don't learn, because even if you do put yourself in a learning position, you're not going to learn anything. So learning is state dependent. Learning, you need to be up, you need to be in the mood, you need to be ready for it, etc., etc. Now, a lot of this I'd like you to apply into your staff training. So your staff training shouldn't be everyone sitting there with their eyes crossed, looking at the ceiling, listening to you talk, or the external trainer you've got coming in talking. Learning is state dependent. They need to be happy, they need to be motivated, it needs to be a bright room, you need to get them engaged. And the other thing is learning is context dependent, as more so than content dependent. So the content is what you train them in or teach them. The context is why they're learning it. So if you have a dental program, for example, it's all very well and good to train them in all the dental stuff, but unless they know that, the why, that better dental care is going to help pets live longer, live happier, live safer, etc., etc., it's fairly irrelevant. So get in any learning or training you do, make sure there's a big why we're doing this right up front, to hook them in and get them enthusiastic about the learning. And the invisible is as important as the visible. So the invisible is the room and the setup for the room, and the mood and the music and the fact that they've probably got nuts and fruits to nibble on and eat and something to drink to keep them active and all that sort of stuff. That stuff is just as important, or more important to learning than anything else. Entertainment is critical. So, the mood should be light and bright and should be lightened up and brightened up. Laughter is good. It helps improve learning. So it shouldn't be a dour, glum, ram it down your throat type of learning. Focus on learning outcomes, not on teaching outcomes. And this is a lot of trainers make the mistake on saying, I've got the agenda and I'm going to ram it down your throat. I'm going to teach you what you need to know. Well, that doesn't work. You need to find out what they want to know, what their outcomes are, and then put your teaching outcomes around that. And when you wrap your teaching outcomes around the learning outcomes with respect to what they want to know and need to know, then you'll get much better uptake of learning. I'm just going to take some points out of this, like I said. The other thing, like I said, keep participants having fun wherever possible. You need to manage their state. If you see the room getting a little bit down because we've been at it 15 or 20 minutes or the topic's heavy or boring, get everyone to stand up and have a stretch break, have a drinks break. You can even, I know some practices, they'll do a little bit of star jumps or something like that. And again, this is all physiological. This is to get the heart and the lungs and the blood pressure and get everything moving. And just take a quick 5-minute walk, eat a little bit, whatever, but get the energy up, because that's when you learn best. The other thing is responsiveness is really important. If they're sitting there dumb and dour and glum, again, like I said, they're not going to learn. The way you get them to learn better is involve them in the learning, and that's called responsiveness. So responsiveness means you asking questions and them answering. So you could do things like, I'm just seeing if I've got it written down in here. Yes, okay. So it's on one of the pages here. So regularly ask questions. You could even do applause for questions. In a small group, I wouldn't do that, but in a larger group, it works very well. You can tell them to put their hands up to ask questions. You can get them, and this again, you may think that you're treating them like infants or kindergarten children, but if you explain why this is happening and that they'll get better learning outcomes, they'll do it. So turn the person next to you and have a 30-second conversation about what you just learnt or what I just said. You can get them to repeat things back to you. You can get them to read along. You can get them to repeat key words. There's all sorts of ways that you can keep them engaged and improve the learning outcomes. So let me go back here. Having music playing is great. As we said, Baroque is good. Lighting changes. You can have certain lighting and change it, every 15 or 20 minutes. It improves learning. Seating arrangement changes are really, really, really important. Typically what you'll find is, everyone will walk into the training room and Jody will sit next to Ben, he'll sit next to Kathy, he'll sit next to Debbie, and those four have sat there in that little clique, in that little group for the last 6 months. So, and that mentally walls them off from the other attendees, the other participants, and also from you. Let me ask you this question. Is learning an uncomfortable process or a comfortable process? Yeah, you're right, it's uncomfortable. When, learning stretches you, it's uncomfortable, it's disconcerting, it gets you out of your comfort zone, it stretches your paradigm to a new paradigm. So learning is uncomfortable. When you are comfortable, you never learn as well or as fast. So those 4 people that are sitting there, I would, have a rule in your training, if I were you, that on every different training, this Tuesday versus next Tuesday versus the Tuesday after versus the Tuesday after, people not be allowed to sit in the same seat and not be allowed to sit next to the same person as in the previous training. If you've been to one of my workshops, you'll know that on day 2 and then day 3 and 4, etc., everyone will walk in the room, they'll sit in the same seats that they sat in, the day before, and I'll say to everyone, hey, how are you, etc., welcome back, etc. You all feeling comfortable? You all feeling good? Okay, great. Get up, move. And I'm literally that blunt. I make everyone move. And then once they've sat down, I explain to them why, because they're disconcerted, they're stressed. Why am I moving? I was having a good time. I was just getting to know Julie. We're becoming good friends. We're having a chit chat while you were talking, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, it works really, really, really well. Games are really help learning. So if you can find a way to play an appropriate game, physical exercises, physical movement, all help as well. Lots of frequent breaks. Now, a learning session should not go for more than 90 minutes. Go back and review all my stuff about the best, how long you should do one thing for before you have a major break. So 90 minutes is a major break, but in that 90 minutes, maybe every 15 or 20 minutes, you have a mini break and do an exercise or a mini break and have a stretch or whatever it happens to be. The other thing is plenty of feedback, what I call approbation for doing the right thing. So from your perspective, when people in the room put their hand up, answer, even if it's totally wrong, the more they get involved, the more they make mistakes, the better they'll learn. And it takes a bit of gumption, a bit of guts on their part to put their hand up and get involved. It puts most people out of their comfort zone. So when you give them approbation for putting their hand up, getting out of their comfort zone and becoming involved, they need to get a really good feedback from you. And be careful with feedback that you don't say, oh, Jody, that was a really excellent answer, and that was a great, really good guess. Let me explain why there's actually a better way to do that. So I'm not saying Jody was wrong, I'm just showing that there's a better way. But the big thing I want to point out is I use the word, great, and then Michelle will say something and I'll say, oh, Michelle, fantastic. That would make, and I've forgotten who I said, Jody. If you give Michelle a much higher accolade for her participation than Jody for hers, then you're going to create this gap and to some degree a conflict within the group. So if you're going to say great to Jody, also say great to Michelle, say great to Debbie, say great to Frank and great to Joe and John, and make it all level. When they give feedback, your feedback should treat them all equally. Don't create artificial levels accidentally. The other thing is you've got 4 styles of learning: visual learners, auditory learners, kinesthetic learners, and auditory digital learners. So visual people have about a 3-minute attention span, and then, oh, spiderwebs in the corner. Oh, sorry. Were you saying something to me? Literally, no joke there. So with visual learners, if you just stand up and speak, you're going to lose a lot of them very quickly. So you need whiteboards, you need flip charts, you need videos, you need handouts. Handouts preferably should be coloured. You know, visual learners love lists that are laminated with tick boxes, so coloured paper and all this sort of stuff. Auditory learners will just sit there and listen. They don't need this sort of stuff. They're great at listening, and their attention span is really good, and they'll be able to repeat back to you very effectively what they've learnt. Kinesthetic learners are the learners that need to do stuff. So they're the ones that need the exercises, they need to get involved, otherwise they don't learn very well. And the auditory digital people, they're the facts and figures and data people. So to retain their attention, you need to give facts, figures, data, and it all needs to, quote unquote, make sense. So when you're doing a presentation, you need to write or develop your presentation and then give it so that you engage all 4 of those learning styles. Otherwise, unfortunately, the ones that you leave out will be left behind. Metaphors are really good for learning as well. Just a couple of, this is the last thing I just want to go through, or there's 2 things I want to go through. So a metaphor is a story. If you've read the book, The Arabian Nights, which is a very, very, very famous book, in the front of the book, the author's written, stories are more important to man than bread itself, because it teaches us how to live and why. So we all know the Hansel and Gretel stories, or the Little Red Wolf stories, or the 3 pigs blowing, no, sorry, that was the wolf that blew down the 3 pigs things, or Goldilocks. I mean, there are so many, the Grimm Brothers stories, there are so many fairy stories and stories like that were told as children, Peter Pan, all those sorts of things, and they're all metaphors. And obviously the Aboriginals have huge list of metaphorical stories about this land and whatnot. So metaphors and stories were the way we learned before we had, pen and paper and all those sorts of things. So we learn very, very, very well by storytelling, and it hooks us in, and we retain that. So if you can develop a story, and a story typically should only be 3, 4, 5 minutes. It can go a little bit longer than that, but it doesn't need to. So if you can develop a story around your dental program, for example, or around why you're doing what you're doing, or a patient outcome or something like that, again, that's going to be a hook that your students, that your employees can hang everything off in their head, and it'll be a much, much, much more effective way of learning and retaining. And the last point is sharing. So I definitely suggest that during your training sessions that there is, peer-to-peer. So do your 30 minutes of training if that's what it is. And then I'd suggest there be a 5 or 7 minute session in which they break off into a group of 2 or a group of 3, and they do some shares. And that is self-learning, self-teaching, self-training, because what they'll get out of that sharing will be as much, if not more, than what they've learned in that half hour from you. So that's it. That's the last video, and that's the sort of the special extra video, this video. And I'm really, really, really hoping that you are employing this material, that you are using this material in your practice, because it is awesome and it works so well. Yes, it involves getting out of your comfort zone. Yes, it is out of left field, and I can guarantee you that every team that I've trained in this just loves it when you explain why they need to learn it. So cool, that's it. I will see you next week. Bye.